The grand hall of the Galactic Confederation gleamed with light from 1,000 different worlds. Ambassador Zithrael stood at the central podium, his blue skin shimmering under the soft glow of the chamber's bioluminescent ceiling. Around him, representatives from 47 different species listened with calm attention. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few existed as clouds of sentient gas contained in elegant crystalline vessels. They had gathered for their monthly assembly, where the greatest concern was usually trade disputes or cultural exchange programs. Zithrael raised his three-fingered hand, and the murmuring stopped. His voice carried through the chamber with practiced ease. My friends, my colleagues, my family across the stars. Today marks the 300th anniversary of the Great Peace. 300 years without a single act of war. 300 years without bloodshed between our peoples. Applause rippled through the chamber, expressed in dozens of different ways. Some clapped, others hummed in harmony, and a few released pleasant scents into the air. High Curator Mevla, a being made entirely of living crystal, chimed softly from her elevated seat. The sound meant approval in her language. We have proven, Zithrael continued, that intelligence leads to peace. That civilization means moving beyond the primitive urges of violence and conquest. We resolve our differences through words, through courts of arbitration, through understanding. In the human section of the chamber, a small delegation sat quietly. There were only 5 of them, led by Ambassador Patricia Reeves, a gray-haired woman with tired eyes. She listened without expression as Zithrael spoke. Next to her, Dr. James Okoye, a xenoanthropologist, took notes on his datapad. Which brings us, Zithrael said, his tone shifting slightly, to a matter of continued concern. The humans, our newest members who joined us 50 years ago, maintain what they call a defense fleet. They spend enormous resources building weapons and training soldiers for wars that will never come. Several species turned to look at the human delegation. Ambassador Reeves kept her face neutral. She had heard this speech before many times. We understand, Zithrael said, trying to sound sympathetic, that humanity comes from a difficult history. Your world knew much conflict. But here in the Confederation, such things are relics of a darker age. We must ask once again that humanity consider reducing its military expenditure. Those resources could feed billions, advance science, create art. Ambassador Reeves stood slowly. The chamber quieted. When she spoke, her voice was measured and polite. The people of Earth thank the Confederation for its concern. However, our position remains unchanged. We maintain our fleet not out of aggression but out of caution. We hope never to use it, but we will keep it ready nonetheless. A Valorian counselor, tall and elegant with skin like polished copper, spoke up. But Ambassador Reeves, what do you fear? We have eliminated war. The galaxy is safe. The galaxy you know is safe, Dr. Okoye said quietly, earning a sharp glance from Reeves. He stood anyway. The galaxy is vast. There are regions we haven't explored, phenomena we don't understand. We simply believe in being prepared. Zithrael smiled, the gesture one he had learned from studying humans. And that is exactly the primitive thinking we must move beyond. Fear of the unknown. Preparation for violence that will never occur. This paranoia serves no one. The Council voted, as they had before, to formally request that humanity reduce its military spending. And as before, the humans politely declined. The matter was tabled for another month. After the session ended, Zithrael approached the human delegation. Despite his public criticism, he genuinely liked Ambassador Reeves. She was intelligent and thoughtful, even if her people were stubbornly backwards. No hard feelings, I hope, he said, extending his hand in the human custom. Reeves shook it firmly. None at all, Zithrael. You're doing what you think is right. So are we. May I ask you something in private? Zithrael glanced around, then lowered his voice. Do your people truly believe war might come again? After 300 years of peace? Reeves studied him for a long moment. My grandfather used to say something. The cost of freedom is eternal vigilance. We don't want war, Zithrael. We hate it more than you can imagine. But yes, we believe that peace must be protected, not just hoped for. Zithrael shook his head sadly. Then I hope, for all our sakes, that one day your people will evolve beyond such fears. Reeves smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I hope we never have to prove we were right. Far away from the gleaming halls of the Confederation capital, in the deep darkness at the galaxy's edge, something stirred. Commander Velik of the scout ship Wandering Song studied his sensors with growing confusion. He was a krill, an insectoid species known for their patience and attention to detail. For 3 days he had been tracking an anomaly that made no sense. "These readings are impossible," his science officer said. She was young, barely out of academy, and this was her first deep space assignment. Energy signatures that don't match any known stellar phenomenon. Movement patterns that suggest artificial origin. But there's nothing there when we scan directly. Velik clicked his mandibles, a gesture of thought. "Send a detailed report to Confederation Command. Mark it as Priority 2. Priority 2 meant unusual but not urgent. Priority 1 was reserved for emergencies, and Velik had never sent a Priority 1 message in his 30 years of service. Message sent, his communications officer confirmed. Should we investigate closer? Velik considered. The Wandering Song was a civilian vessel with basic sensors and no weapons beyond meteor deflection lasers. But they were scientific explorers. Strange readings were exactly what they were meant to investigate. Take us in slowly, Velik ordered. Keep all sensors active. At the first sign of danger, we jump away. The ship moved forward, its gentle drives pushing it toward the source of the anomaly. The crew watched their screens with scientific curiosity rather than fear. They lived in the safest era of galactic history. What could possibly threaten them? The readings grew stronger. Energy patterns spiked across the spectrum. The science officer gasped as new data flooded her console. Commander, I'm picking up organic signatures. Massive ones. And they're moving. Before Velik could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. Something emerged from the darkness. Something that made his ancient evolutionary instincts scream. It was huge, organic, alive in a way that defied nature. The hull was made of what looked like chitin and bone, pulsing with bioluminescent veins. It didn't look built. It looked grown. Emergency jump, Velik shouted. Get us out of here now! The communications officer's voice cracked with panic. Sending Priority 1 distress. The transmission cut off mid-word. On the thing's hull, 1,000 eyes opened at once, all focused on the tiny scout ship. The Wandering Song tried to run, its jump drive charging desperately. But tendrils of living matter shot across space faster than thought, wrapping around the ship like a spider catching a fly. In the Confederation capital, Zithrael was having dinner with colleagues, laughing about the day's proceedings. Ambassador Reeves was aboard a transport heading back to the human diplomatic station. And in deep space, the Wandering Song was pulled into the massive creature's maw and consumed ship and crew without a trace. The last thing Velik saw was more of the creatures emerging from the dark. Dozens of them, hundreds. An armada of living nightmares all heading in one direction, toward the heart of the Confederation, toward the worlds that thought the age of war had ended forever. The emergency session was called at midnight, Confederation Standard Time. Zithrael rushed into the chamber still wearing his sleeping robes, his face tight with worry. Around him, representatives arrived in various states of dishevelment. High Curator Mevla's crystal surface flickered with agitated light patterns. Commander Thalsis stood at the central podium, his insectoid features unreadable, but his posture radiating tension. He held what was supposed to be a ceremonial position, Defense Coordinator of the Confederation. For 300 years it had been exactly that, ceremonial. Until now. 3 worlds, Thalsis said without preamble. Kepler 17, New Harmony, and Velshar Station. All went silent within 48 hours. No distress calls. No evacuation signals. Just silence. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Zithrael felt his stomach tighten. 3 worlds didn't just go silent. It was impossible. We sent investigation teams, Thalsis continued. They found nothing. Not destroyed worlds, empty worlds. Every living being gone. Buildings intact. Ships still in orbit. But no people. No animals, no plants. Nothing alive remained. A crystalline delegate chimed urgently. Disease? Some kind of plague? We considered that, Thallis said. But a plague doesn't take all life, every form of it, in perfect synchronization. And it doesn't do this. He activated the central display. Holographic images appeared showing cities on the 3 lost worlds. The buildings stood undamaged, but something was wrong. The surfaces were covered in a strange organic residue, like dried mucus or webbing. It coated everything in a thin layer. Dr. Okoye, present as part of the human delegation, stood abruptly. His face had gone pale. Commander Thals, do you have chemical analysis of that residue? Yes, Thalsu sent the data to Okoye's pad. Why, do you recognize it? Okoye's hands trembled as he read. He looked up at Ambassador Reeves, who had also gone very still. We need to access the Confederation Historical Archives immediately. Section Theta 9 records sealed 2,000 years ago. High Curator Mevla's chimes took on a warning tone. Those archives are restricted. They contain information deemed too disturbing for general knowledge. I know what they contain, Okoye said quietly. And if I'm right, we're all in terrible danger. Within the hour, the council gathered in the secure archives chamber. Ancient data crystals lined the walls, containing information from civilizations long gone. Okoye worked the interface with practiced efficiency, clearly having studied these systems before. The humans have been researching our ancient history since you joined, Thals observed. Why? Because we learned long ago that those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, Ambassador Reeves said. Show them, James. Okoye brought up records from 2 millennia past. Images appeared of creatures that made the council gasp in horror. They looked similar to the organic ships in the scout ship's final transmission, the one Velik had managed to send before dying. They were called the Devourers, Okoye explained, a hive-mind entity that consumed entire civilizations. Not for territory or resources in the traditional sense. They harvested all biological matter, all life, to fuel their own growth and reproduction. I know these stories, Zithrael said, his voice shaking. Every child learns them as myths, cautionary tales about the old days. But the ancient civilizations destroyed the Devourers. The war lasted 100 years, but they won. They thought they won, Okoye corrected. The Devourers disappeared. The ancients assumed they were extinct. But what if they were just dormant? What if they were waiting? As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Thals's communicator erupted with frantic messages. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he listened. Another world. Tarsus Prime. We're receiving distress calls now. They say the sky is filled with organic ships. They're being attacked. Deploy defensive forces, Mevla commanded. Thals looked at her helplessly. High Curator, we don't have defensive forces. We have patrol ships with mining equipment and cargo vessels. The last military warship was decommissioned 290 years ago. The reality crashed over the council like a cold wave. They had spent 3 centuries dismantling every weapon, every warship, every military installation. They had turned themselves into a civilization utterly incapable of defending itself. Ambassador Reeves stood. Commander Thals, can you establish a communication channel with the Devourers? Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Thals worked quickly. Within minutes, a channel opened. What came through was not words or even thoughts in any recognizable form. It was hunger. Pure, vast, endless hunger that made everyone in the room feel sick. One of the younger delegates vomited. Others backed away from the speakers as if the feeling could reach through and touch them. The message was clear. The Devourers didn't want to talk. They wanted to feed. Over the next 3 days, 2 more worlds fell silent. Civilian ships that tried to defend their homes were swept aside like insects. Mining lasers and cargo tractor beams did nothing against the Devourer bioships. Refugees fled in every direction, clogging space lanes, overwhelming stations. The Confederation Council met in continuous session. They tried everything they could think of. Economic sanctions, which made no sense against creatures that didn't trade. Diplomatic pressure, which assumed the Devourers cared about galactic opinion. Strongly worded condemnations that echoed uselessly into the void. Thals reported each day with worse news. They're spreading, following predictable expansion patterns. At this rate, they'll reach the core worlds within 2 months, and we cannot stop them. We need weapons, a delegate said. We need soldiers. We need time to rebuild our defenses. Building a military fleet from nothing takes decades, Thals said flatly. We don't have decades. We have weeks. Zithrael looked across the chamber at Ambassador Reeves. She met his gaze steadily. The question hung unspoken between them. The humans, Zithrael said finally, his pride crumbling. You have warships. You have weapons. You've been preparing for this. Reeves stood slowly. Not for this specifically. But yes, we're prepared for war. We're asking for your help, High Curator Mevla said, her crystalline voice barely audible. We're asking you to fight for us. To kill for us? The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood the weight of what they were asking. For 300 years they had lectured humanity on their barbarism, their paranoia, their primitive attachment to violence, and now they needed that violence to survive. Ambassador Reeves looked at Dr. Okoye, who nodded slightly. She took a breath. I need to contact Earth Command. The fleet is stationed at Outpost Sanctuary, 47 light years from here. We'll need authorization from the President and Parliament. How long? Thals asked. For authorization? A few hours. For the fleet to arrive? She paused. 3 days. The Valorian counselor who had questioned humanity's military spending looked confused. But that's impossible. Standard FTL drive takes weeks to cross that distance. Reeves smiled, but it was a warrior's smile, cold and sharp. We don't use standard FTL drives on our warships, counselor. We use military-grade jump drives. Much faster, much more dangerous, much more expensive. The kind of technology you asked us to stop developing. 3 days later, space above the Confederation capital rippled and tore. One by one, 13 massive warships emerged from jump space in perfect formation. They were nothing like the elegant curves of Confederation vessels. They were angular, brutal, covered in armor plating and weapon ports. The largest ship, the UESS Retribution, took position at the fleet's center. On its bridge, Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair watching the Confederation capital grow larger on the view screen. Her face was calm, but her hands gripped the armrest tightly. Send a message to the Confederation Council, she said. Humanity has arrived. Tell them the fleet is ready. In the council chamber, Zithrael watched the human warships on the display. He felt a mixture of relief and shame. They had been saved by the very violence they had condemned. And he wondered, not for the first time, if humanity had been right all along. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the Retribution, looking out at the gathered Confederation representatives. They stared at her ship with expressions ranging from hope to horror. She had expected this. To species that had lived in peace for 3 centuries, a true warship must look like a monster, and the Retribution was definitely a monster. 500 meters of reinforced titanium ceramic composite armor, railguns that could punch through a small moon, missile batteries loaded with nuclear warheads, point defense lasers that could track and destroy 1,000 targets simultaneously, and a crew of 800 trained warriors who drilled constantly for combat they hoped would never come. Until now. Zithrael was among the observers, standing with Commander Thalses and several other council members. He approached Chen cautiously, as if afraid the ship itself might attack him. Captain Chen, he said, his voice uncertain. Thank you for coming. We are grateful, Chen nodded. She was a woman in her mid-40s with short, dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. Save your thanks until we've actually helped, Ambassador. Right now we need information. Tell me everything about these devourers. They moved to the briefing room, where holographic displays showed the current tactical situation. It was worse than Chen had expected. 7 worlds lost completely. Dozens of stations evacuated. The Devourer fleet was spreading like a virus through Confederation space. They don't seem to follow our understanding of physics, Thals explained. Their ships are organic living things. They heal damage. They adapt to attacks. They don't need fuel or supplies in any conventional sense. But they can be killed, Dr. Okoye said, joining the group. He had come aboard with the Confederation delegation. The ancient races defeated them before. They're tough but not invincible. Lieutenant Commander Akari Tanaka, Chen's tactical officer, studied the data with professional interest. She was younger than Chen, sharp-featured and intense. Captain, I recommend we observe one of their ships in action before engagement. We need to understand how they fight. Agreed, Chen said. Commander Thalles, are there any active battles we can reach quickly? The colony on Reshitar sent a distress call 20 minutes ago, Thalses said. They have perhaps 6 hours before the Devourers arrive. Set course, Chen ordered. Maximum combat speed. And get me Admiral Webb on secure channel. The Retribution and 5 escort frigates jumped to the Reshitar system. They arrived to find a pathetic defense. Cargo ships trying to slow the Devourers. Civilian vessels attempting to evacuate millions of colonists. And bearing down on them, 3 massive Devourer bioships, each the size of a small city. Zithrael watched from the observation deck, unable to look away. The Devourer ships were nightmares made real. They pulsed with unnatural life, covered in what looked like eyes and mouths and things that defied description. Tentacles hundreds of meters long reached out, grabbing cargo ships and pulling them into grinding maws. "Those ships," he whispered. "They're eating everything." "Now you understand," Chen said quietly, standing beside him. "This isn't a war about territory or ideology. It's about survival. Yours and theirs. And only one side can win." She touched her comm badge. "All ships, battle stations. Tanaka, initiate attack pattern Delta 7. Let's see what these things are made of." The Retribution moved forward with surprising grace for something so large. The escort frigates spread into formation, creating overlapping fields of fire, and then at 3,000 kilometers Chen gave the order. "Fire." The railguns spoke first. Tungsten rounds accelerated to a fraction of light speed, invisible until they impacted. The nearest Devourer ship shuddered as rounds punched through its organic hull. Strange fluids leaked into space, freezing instantly. But the ship didn't die. Even as Zithrael watched, the wounds began to close. The hull rippled and reformed, healing the damage within seconds. "Adaptive regeneration," Tanaka reported. "Impressive. Captain, recommend switching to thermal weapons." "Agreed. All ships, fire missiles, pattern Omega." Dozens of missiles streaked from the human ships. These weren't conventional explosives. As they neared the Devourer, they detonated in sequence, creating a wave of plasma heat that turned space itself into fire. The Devourer ship's healing couldn't keep up with that. Its outer layers burned away, and it let out a sound that made everyone aboard the Retribution clutch their heads in pain. "It's screaming," Zithrael gasped. "It's alive and it's screaming." "Yes," Chen said, her face grim. "War is never pretty, Ambassador. But it's them or us." The damaged Devourer tried to retreat, but the human frigates pursued, their lasers cutting into its wounded sections. Within minutes, the massive creature stopped moving, its bioluminescent veins going dark. It was dead. The other two Devourers changed tactics immediately. They split up, trying to flank the human formation. But Chen had expected this. She had studied every scrap of ancient data about these creatures. She knew they were intelligent, adaptive, dangerous. "Tanaka, implement Plan Beta 4. Show them what happens when they try to surround us." The Retribution's engines flared, and it spun in space, bringing all its weapons to bear on one Devourer, while the frigates handled the other. It was a dance, violent and precise, humanity's skill in warfare honed over centuries of practice. The Confederation observers watched in awe as the human ships moved with perfect coordination, each covering the other's weaknesses, each strike calculated for maximum effect. The second Devourer died in a nuclear fireball. The third, seeing its companions destroyed, tried to flee. Chen let it go. "Let it run," she said. "Let it tell the others what happened here." The evacuation ships cheered. The Confederation delegates looked at Chen with new respect and new fear. Commander Thals clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "You've done this before," he said. "Not against Devourers, but you've fought wars. Real wars. Humanity's history is full of wars," Dr. Okoye said sadly. "Against each other, usually. We've had centuries to perfect the art of killing. It's not something we're proud of, but it is something we're good at." Over the next week, the human fleet engaged the Devourers 17 times. They won every engagement. Word spread through the Confederation that hope existed, but the cost was becoming clear. The Devourers adapted with each battle, learning from their losses. They started using new tactics, creating diversions, attacking supply lines, and intelligence reports brought terrible news. The main Devourer fleet was massing at the edge of explored space. Not dozens of ships, thousands. Admiral Marcus Webb arrived on the Retribution to coordinate the defense. He was an older man, gray-haired and scarred, with the look of someone who had seen too many friends die. He gathered the Confederation military leaders, such as they were, in the briefing room. "We can't win a defensive war," Webb said bluntly. "There are too many of them. They'll overwhelm us eventually through sheer numbers." "Then what do you suggest?" Mevla asked. Her crystal surface had lost its usual luster, dimmed by stress and fear. "Offensive operations," Webb said. "We take the fight to them. We hit their staging areas, disrupt their coordination, make them react to us instead of the other way around." The Confederation leaders looked shocked. "Attack them?" Zithrael said. "In their own territory? It's the only way," Chen said. "Defense is passive. It gives them all the advantages, but we're good at offense. We're very good at it." Thals has studied the tactical map. To do this, We would need to train Confederation forces in your methods. Our people don't know how to fight. Then we teach them, Webb said. Starting now. We have perhaps 3 weeks before the main Devourer fleet reaches the core worlds. That's not much time, but it's what we have. The training began immediately. Human soldiers taught Confederation citizens how to use weapons, how to think tactically, how to fight and kill and survive. It was hard for species that had known only peace. Some couldn't do it, breaking down under the stress. But others learned quickly, driven by the need to protect their families. A young Valorian named Shaltir became one of the best students. She had lost her entire family when her homeworld fell. She approached Chen one day during training exercises. "Why do you do this?" Shaltir asked. "You could have stayed safe. This isn't your war." Chen looked at her for a long moment. "It became our war the moment we joined the Confederation. When you make a commitment to stand with others, you keep it. That's what being human means. At least that's what it's supposed to mean." In his quarters, Zithrael recorded a message to the Confederation archives. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "We were all wrong. We thought evolution meant leaving violence behind. But perhaps true evolution is knowing when violence is necessary and being strong enough to use it in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. The humans don't love war, but they understand it. And right now, that understanding is all that stands between us and extinction." The 3 weeks passed quickly. The combined fleet, human warships surrounded by Confederation vessels retrofitted with what weapons they could carry, waited at the edge of the core systems. And then, like a dark tide, the Devourer Armada appeared. Chen looked at the tactical display showing thousands of enemy contacts and felt the old familiar fear before battle. But she pushed it down, buried it under layers of training and discipline. "All ships," she broadcasted. "This is Captain Chen. Today we fight not just for the Confederation, but for..." The battle lasted 3 days without pause. Space became a graveyard of ships, both allied and enemy. The Devourer fleet was massive, but the combined forces fought with desperate courage. Human tactics mixed with Confederation innovation created strategies neither side could have achieved alone. On the second day, the fleet fought in the Veil Nebula, a region of dense gas and cosmic dust. Admiral Webb saw an opportunity and seized it. He ordered the human ships to lure a large Devourer formation deep into the nebula's thickest regions. "They can't see through this soup any better than we can," Webb explained to Thals. "But we have better sensors, and we know how to fight blind." The trap worked perfectly. Devourer ships stumbled through the nebula, separated from their hive coordination. Human frigates struck from concealment, firing and disappearing back into the cosmic fog. Confederation ships, crewed by newly trained warriors, followed the patterns they had learned, supporting the human vessels with covering fire. But the Devourers learned quickly, adapting even faster than expected. They released smaller organisms, living sensors that spread through the nebula like a net. The ambush advantages disappeared. Ships that had been hunters became hunted. The Confederation cruiser Harmony's Dream, retrofitted with human weapons but still crewed primarily by civilians turned soldiers, found itself surrounded. Its captain, a crystalline named Velmarsh, broadcast a final message. "Tell my family I fought well. Tell them the peace was worth protecting." The Harmony's Dream rammed itself into the largest Devourer ship, its makeshift nuclear reactor overloading on impact. The explosion consumed both vessels and cleared a path for refugee ships to escape. Zithrael watched from the command ship, his hands shaking. He had known Velmarsh for 40 years. They had shared meals, discussed philosophy, laughed together. Now his friend was gone, atomized in an instant of violence. "This is the price," Dr. Okoye said quietly, standing beside him. "This is what we tried to tell you. War isn't glorious. It's sacrifice. It's losing people you love to protect people you've never met." The third day brought the hardest fighting. A Devourer breakthrough force reached the refugee convoy heading away from the front lines. Human escort ships moved to intercept, outnumbered 5-1. Among them was the destroyer Defiance, commanded by Captain Miguel Torres. Ensign Marcus Lee, barely 22 years old, manned the weapon station aboard the Defiance. He was scared, exhausted, and determined. In his pocket, he carried a photo of a Valorian family he had befriended during the evacuation of Tarsus Prime. They were in the convoy somewhere. "Trying to reach safety, Captain," the tactical officer reported. "The Devourers are breaking through. They're heading for Convoy Section 7. Torres didn't hesitate. All power to engines. We're going to block them. The Defiance accelerated, putting itself between the Devourer ships and the helpless refugees. Its weapons fired continuously, tearing into enemy hulls. But there were too many. The Devourers swarmed around the destroyer, their organic weapons ripping through shields and armor. Hull breach on decks 3 through 5, someone reported. The ship shuddered as something massive impacted it. "Sir, they're boarding us," Lee said, his voice tight with fear. Through the internal cameras, they could see Devourer organisms flooding through the breached sections. They looked like nightmares, all teeth and claws and hunger. "Seal the bridge," Torres ordered. "Everyone grab a weapon. If they want this ship, they'll have to pry it from our dead hands." The bridge crew, 15 men and women from Earth, made their stand. They had trained for this, hoped it would never happen, and now faced it with the courage of those who choose to stand rather than run. Lee thought of the Valorian family, hoped they made it to safety, and fired his sidearm at the creatures tearing through the bridge door. The Defiance died hard, taking 4 Devourer ships with it. By the time reinforcements arrived, there were no survivors. But the convoy escaped. Thousands of civilians lived because 15 humans chose to die. Captain Chen received the report while coordinating another engagement. She read it twice, her face carefully blank, then set it aside. There would be time to grieve later. Now there were more battles to fight. But Shaltir, the young Valorian training with the human Marines, heard about the Defiance. She learned that Ensign Lee had saved the convoy section carrying her people, the survivors from her world. She found Dr. Okoye in the medical bay helping treat wounded. "Why?" she asked, tears streaming down her copper-colored face. "Why did they do it?" "They could have run. They could have saved themselves." Okoye looked tired, older than his years. "'Cause that's what soldiers do, Shaltir. They put themselves between danger and those who can't fight. Lee knew your people were in that convoy. He made a choice." "I don't understand humans," she said. "You're capable of such violence, but also such sacrifice. How can both exist in the same species?" "They exist in all species," Okoye said gently. "You just forgot because you didn't need to remember. But now you're remembering. You fought yesterday, didn't you?" "Fought well, I heard," she nodded. "I killed 3 Devourer organisms. I felt sick after. But I would do it again to protect others. Then you understand more than you think." The battles continued, each one costly, each one necessary. The combined fleet adapted and learned. Drykon, a reptilian engineer from the Confederation, worked alongside human technicians to modify ship systems. He began to understand the philosophy behind human military design. "Your ships aren't elegant," he said to one of the engineers. "They're brutal, functional, with redundancy built into every system." The engineer, a woman named Kim Park, nodded. "Pretty ships die when hit. Ugly ships keep fighting. We learned that the hard way centuries ago. We forgot so much," Drakon said. "We thought forgetting made us better. But some knowledge should never be lost." Intelligence reports confirmed what everyone feared. The main Devourer hive nexus, the central intelligence coordinating the entire invasion, had been located. It was aboard a massive bioship 3 times the size of anything they had encountered before. Positioned at the edge of the system, Admiral Webb called his command staff together, including Chen and the senior Confederation officers. "If we take out that hive nexus, we disrupt their coordination. The individual ships will still be dangerous, but they'll be confused, unorganized. It's a suicide mission," Thal said flatly. "That ship is surrounded by thousands of defenders." "Not if we create a diversion," Chen said, studying the tactical map. "Most of their fleet is engaged with our main forces. If we could pull more of them away, a small strike team might get through. We'd need to make them think we're attacking something vital," Webb said. "Something they'd commit forces to defend." Mevla's crystal form flickered with urgent light. "The Confederation homeworld is in this system. If they believed it was under serious attack, they would have to respond," Webb finished. He looked at Chen. "You're thinking what I'm thinking." Chen nodded slowly. "We make a run at the homeworld with the main fleet. All-out assault, everything we have. They pull forces from the hive nexus to defend. Meanwhile, a strike team uses the chaos to infiltrate." "It's risky," Zithrael said. "If the strike team fails, we've committed our entire fleet to a diversionary attack." "If we do nothing," Webb said, "we lose anyway. This war has taught me that the Confederation produces brave warriors when needed. Now we need to trust them." The decision was made. Chen volunteered to lead the strike team personally. Webb refused. "I need you commanding the retribution for the main assault," he said. This mission requires someone who can think creatively, adapt instantly, and lead a mixed team of humans and Confederation forces. He looked directly at Zithriel. Ambassador, you know your people better than any of us. You understand how they think, how they move. I want you on this mission. Zithrael stood in shocked silence. Him? A diplomat who had spent his life arguing against violence, leading a military strike? But he thought of Velmarsh sacrificing himself for others, of Ensign Lee dying to save strangers, of all the soldiers, human and Confederation alike, who had given everything. I'll do it, he said. Tell me what you need. The plan was set in motion. The combined fleet would initiate the Prometheus Protocol, a desperate all-or-nothing assault on the Confederation homeworld's orbital space, drawing Devourer forces away from the Hive Nexus. Meanwhile, Zithrael and a strike team of 20 volunteers, human and alien together, would infiltrate the Hive Nexus and destroy it from within. As the fleet prepared for battle, Chen found Zithrael in the armory, awkwardly fitting himself with combat armor designed for humans. I never wanted to wear this, he said quietly. Never wanted to hold a weapon? I know, Chen said, but you're doing it anyway. That's what courage is, Ambassador. Doing what's necessary even when it terrifies you. She helped him adjust the armor properly. The team is good. They'll watch your back. Trust them, trust yourself, and remember what you're fighting for. Peace, Zithrael said. Strange how we must wage war to protect it. Chen smiled sadly. That's the human condition. Maybe now it's the Confederation condition too. The fleet began its attack run and the final desperate gambit commenced. The main fleet struck the Confederation homeworld's orbit like a hammer. Captain Chen watched from the Retribution's bridge as thousands of ships, human and Confederation together, engaged the Devourer forces in the most desperate battle yet. Explosions lit up space like deadly fireworks. Ships died every second, both sides taking horrific casualties. They're taking the bait, Lieutenant Tanaka reported. Devourer ships are breaking off from the Hive Nexus. They're committing everything to defend their position here. Good, Chen said, though her face showed the cost. Another Confederation cruiser died on the view screen, its crew of newly trained warriors going down fighting. Keep the pressure on. Make them believe this is our real target. Far from the main battle, Zithrael's strike team approached the massive Hive Nexus in a captured Devourer organism. The human technical specialist, Sergeant Rodriguez, had managed to convince the small bioship that they were part of the Hive. It was disgusting sitting inside a living creature that smelled of decay and alien biology, but it worked. The team consisted of 20 volunteers, 10 humans, including Dr. Okoye, who insisted on coming despite his civilian status, 10 Confederation members, including Shaltir the young Valorian warrior, and Drakon the engineer. They carried enough explosives to crack a small moon, all focused on one goal: reach the Hive Nexus core and destroy it. We're passing through their outer perimeter, Rodriguez said, his hands working the organic controls with visible disgust. So far they think we're one of them. Zithrael checked his weapon for the 10th time. His hands had stopped shaking somewhere during the approach. Terror had given way to a strange calm, the acceptance that came with knowing you might not survive. Ambassador, Okoye said quietly, if we don't make it, I want you to know it's been an honor serving alongside you. The honor is mine, Zithrael replied. You humans taught us that strength isn't the same as cruelty, and that peace requires guardians. They penetrated deeper into the Hive Nexus. The bioship was impossibly vast inside, a maze of organic corridors pulsing with alien life. The team moved quickly, following Drakon, who had studied the structural scans. The core should be 3 kilometers ahead, he whispered. That's where the Central Intelligence resides. They encountered their first patrol after 2 kilometers. Devourer organisms, smaller than the bioships but still deadly, sensed something wrong. The team opened fire. In the narrow corridors there was no room for tactics, just brutal close-quarters combat. Shaltir fought like a demon, her copper skin splattered with alien blood. A devourer organism lunged at her. She killed it with 3 precise shots, exactly as the human Marines had taught her. No hesitation, no mercy, just survival. They lost 2 people in that corridor, a human corporal and a crystalline soldier named Felwyn, both torn apart by devourer claws before their teammates could save them. The team pushed forward, leaving their dead behind because stopping meant everyone died. The corridor opened into a massive chamber. And there, pulsing with sickly bioluminescence, was the core. It was beautiful and horrible at once. A vast neural network of living tissue and alien thought. Billions of neurons firing in patterns that coordinated the entire Devourer fleet. "Plant the charges," Zithriel ordered, sounding more confident than he felt. "We have 10 minutes before they realize we're here." The team spread out, placing explosive charges at structural weak points Drakon identified. The work went quickly, practiced hands moving with efficiency born of desperate training. Then Okoye stopped. He was staring at a section of the core where images seemed to flicker, broadcast from the neural tissue itself. "Wait," he said. "Everyone, look at this." The images showed worlds dying, consumed by the Devourers. But they also showed something else. A dying region of space, stars going supernova in a cascading chain reaction, the Devourers fleeing that cosmic catastrophe, desperate, starving, searching for any source of biological matter to survive. "They're refugees," Okoye said, his voice filled with horror and understanding. "They're not evil. They're running from their own apocalypse. They're just trying to survive." Zithriel felt his world tilt. All this death, all this sacrifice, and the enemy was just as desperate as they were. "But they're still killing us," he said. "They're consuming entire civilizations." "Because they don't know any other way," Okoye said. "They're a hive mind evolved to consume. They probably don't even understand that other species are truly sentient." Rodriguez looked at the charges. "We have 6 minutes before these blow. If we're going to change the plan, now's the time." The team looked at Zithriel. Somehow, the diplomat who had never wanted to be a soldier had become their commander. The decision was his. He thought about Velmarsh dying for peace, about Ensign Lee sacrificing himself for strangers, about all the dead on both sides, victims of a cosmic tragedy neither truly understood. "Okoye," he said, "can you communicate with it? Can you make it understand?" "Maybe," Okoye said. "The neural patterns are complex, but there's definitely intelligence here. If I can access the core directly, establish a mental bridge." "Do it," Zithriel ordered. "We don't have much time." Okoye approached the core, placing his hands on the pulsing tissue. The team watched tensely, weapons ready. If this went wrong, they would all die here. Okoye's eyes went wide, then closed. His body went rigid as his mind touched something vast and alien and hungry. He gasped. And when he spoke, his voice was layered with something else. Something that echoed with the voice of billions. "We hunger, always hunger. The stars die.
We die.
Must feed, we know," Zithriel said, stepping forward. "But you don't have to kill us. There are other ways. Uninhabited systems. Resources we can share. We can help you." The presence in Okoye's mind recoiled, confused. The concept of help was foreign to creatures who had only ever known consuming or being consumed. Zithriel continued, speaking quickly. "You're intelligent. You can learn. We've mapped thousands of systems rich with biological matter but no sentient life. We can guide you there. You can feed without killing anyone. Why? Would you help?" "Because that's what civilized species do," Zithriel said. "We find solutions that let everyone survive. It's harder than fighting, but it's better." The hive mind processed this, and in that moment the battle above the homeworld changed. Devourer ships began breaking off, pulling back. The coordination that had made them so deadly was faltering, as the hive nexus struggled with a completely new concept. On the Retribution's bridge, Chen watched in confusion as the enemy fleet withdrew. "What's happening? Are they retreating?" "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer said. "It's from Ambassador Zithriel's team. They're saying, 'Stand down?' They're negotiating?" Chen's mouth fell open. A negotiation. In the middle of the greatest battle in Confederation history, someone was negotiating. In the Hive Nexus core, Okoye maintained the mental bridge while Drakon worked frantically at his datapad. "I'm sending star maps," the engineer said. "Systems rich with primitive life, no sentient species. Enough to feed 100 Devourer fleets." The presence considered, felt the truth in the offer, understood perhaps for the first time that not every species was prey. That some could be something else, partners, helpers, friends. Except, we'll go to these systems. We'll not consume sentient life. "And if you're attacked?" Zithriel asked. "If someone threatens you, we defend, but we do not hunt." It wasn't a perfect solution. The devourers would still consume living matter, just not sentient species. They would still be dangerous if provoked. But it was a solution that didn't require the extinction of either side. Okoye collapsed as the mental bridge broke. Rodriguez caught him, checking his vital signs. He's alive. Exhausted but alive. Disarm the charges, Zithrael ordered. We're done here. The war ended not with a final battle but with an agreement. The Devourer fleet withdrew to the uninhabited systems. Guided by Confederation nav beacons, they would feed, grow, heal their wounded, and they would remember the species that chose to help rather than exterminate. But the cost had been terrible. 7 worlds lost, millions dead, hundreds of ships destroyed. The Confederation capital held a memorial service that lasted 3 days, honoring the fallen from every species. Captain Chen stood in the human section of the memorial garden, looking at the names carved in stone. So many names. The entire crew of the Defiance. Ensign Marcus Lee, 22 years old, who died protecting strangers. Hundreds of others who had volunteered to fight a war that wasn't theirs. Sheltier found her there. The young Valorian warrior moved differently now, with the careful precision of someone who had seen combat. Captain Chen, she said quietly, I wanted to thank you for everything. We did what needed doing, Chen said. Nothing more. No, Sheltier said. You did more. You could have destroyed the Devourers completely, but you gave them a chance. That's what makes you different. You know how to fight, but you also know when to stop. Chen smiled sadly. We learned that lesson the hard way, Sheltier. Hopefully you won't have to. Months passed. The Confederation rebuilt, but it rebuilt differently. They created the Joint Defense Force, a combined military organization training under human veterans. Species that had never held weapons. The sky above Thessara Prime burned with colors that shouldn't exist. Purple and green fire rained down from orbit as the Kryloth warships tore through the planet's defenses like paper. In the capital city's command center, General Vorath watched his world die on a dozen screens at once. All defensive platforms destroyed, an officer reported, his voice shaking. The orbital ring is gone. They're targeting the surface installations now. Vorath closed his 4 eyes and felt his heart sink. Thessara Prime had the second strongest military in the known galaxy. They had prepared for this invasion for months after watching the Kryloth hegemony sweep through the outer rim. 47 worlds had fallen to these conquerors. 47 civilizations brought to their knees. Thessara Prime was supposed to be different. They had energy shields that could withstand nuclear strikes. They had quantum-linked defense grids. They had 3 million soldiers ready to fight. The battle had lasted 4 hours. Send the surrender signal, Vorath said quietly. On the bridge of the hegemony flagship Eternal Dominion, War Master Zethus watched the enemy's white flag appear on his displays. His lipless mouth curved into something like a smile. The Kryloth were tall, thin creatures covered in dark scales. Their eyes glowed red in the dim light of the bridge. Another world kneels, Zethus said to his second-in-command. Log the time. 4 hours and 17 minutes from first contact to surrender. Acceptable. The Thessarans had a strong reputation, the second-in-command noted, yet they fell as easily as the others. Zethus nodded. Fear is our greatest weapon. They knew what happened to those who resisted. They knew resistance was futile. This knowledge breaks them before we fire the first shot. He walked to the star map that dominated the center of his bridge. Dozens of worlds glowed red, marking hegemony conquests. Zethus studied the remaining independent systems, his claw tapping against the display. The Terran fringe, he said finally. These humans. What do we know? An intelligence officer brought up new data. A young species, War Master. They've only had faster-than-light travel for 200 years. Their technology is outdated by our standards. They control 23 colony worlds, most of them poor in resources. Military strength? Minimal. Their fleet is spread thin, protecting shipping lanes from pirates. They've never fought a major war against another spacefaring species. Zethus studied the human territory. It was small, tucked away in a corner of the galaxy that nobody wanted. The worlds were described as barely habitable in the reports. Thin atmospheres, harsh weather, minimal precious metals. Why did they settle such terrible worlds? Zethus asked. The intelligence officer made a gesture equivalent to a shrug. Our analysts believe humans have an unusually high tolerance for hardship. They seem to prefer challenging themselves rather than seeking comfort. Foolish, Zethus said, but it matters little. We will add their worlds to the hegemony. Assign Battle Group 7 to the human campaign. That should be more than sufficient. Battle Group 7, War Master? That's only 12 ships. These humans are primitives, Zethus replied. We conquered Thesara Prime with 15 ships. The humans will surrender even faster, perhaps in 2 or 3 hours. The order went out across the hegemony communication network. Battle Group 7 received its assignment and began the journey toward human space. They expected an easy victory. They expected another quick surrender. They had no idea what was coming. 3 days away from the nearest military outpost, Captain Sarah Chen was having a very bad morning. The Persephone's Gambit had suffered a coolant leak in the No. 3 cargo hold, and the automatic repair systems had decided this was the perfect time to malfunction. Wu, please tell me you can fix this without venting the entire hold into space, Sarah said into her communicator. Her chief engineer's voice crackled back. I can fix it, Captain. But you're not going to like how. I never like how. Just do it. Sarah Chen was 42 years old and had been flying cargo ships since she was 19. The Gambit was her third ship and by far the oldest. The vessel was 60 years old, built before Sarah was even born. Its hull was covered in patches and welds. Its engines made concerning noises. Its life support system had moods, but it was her ship, and she loved it. Sarah sat in the captain's chair and reviewed their route. They were hauling mining equipment to New Coventry, a remote colony that specialized in rare mineral extraction. It was boring work, but it paid the bills. Her crew of 8 were good people, experienced spacers who knew how to handle an aging ship. The bridge door opened and her first officer, James Park, entered with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use this, he said, handing her one. You're a saint, Sarah replied, taking a grateful sip. How's the cargo? Secure? Pa says he'll have the coolant leak fixed in an hour. James paused. We're getting some strange reports on the long-range channels. Strange how? Distress signals from the inner colonies. Something about an invasion fleet. James pulled up the communication logs on his tablet. It's probably nothing. You know how rumors spread. Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Show me. The reports were fragmented and hard to verify, but they all said the same thing. An alien fleet had entered human space. Multiple colonies had gone dark. Ships that went to investigate hadn't returned. This is the Kryloth hegemony, Sarah said quietly. It has to be. I've been following the news from the Outer Rim. They've been conquering everything in their path. Surely our military can handle them, James said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah pulled up a star map and felt her blood run cold. Our fleet is weeks away. They're deployed in the far reaches dealing with pirate activity. She zoomed in on the map, tracing possible invasion routes. If the hegemony comes through the Tanis corridor, there's nothing between them and Earth. How long until they reach the core worlds? If they move fast, a week. Maybe less. James set down his coffee cup. What do we do? Sarah looked at her worn, patched, barely functioning cargo ship. She looked at the route to safety. Then she looked at the map showing the Tanis corridor, the narrow passage that led to humanity's heart. Get me Admiral Holland on the command frequency, she said, and tell the crew to prepare for a course change. Where are we going? Sarah's jaw tightened. To buy humanity sometime. 3 days later, War Master Zethus received his first report from the human campaign. Battle Group 7 had entered the Tanis corridor and was making excellent progress. 4 human colonies had been neutralized without resistance. The populations had evacuated before the hegemony arrived. They run, Zethus observed. Like all prey species, they abandon their nests and flee. The humans appear to be retreating toward their core worlds, his intelligence officer reported. We're following the only viable hyperspace route through this region. At current speed, we'll reach their primary worlds in 72 hours. And their military response? None yet. We believe their fleet is still days away from an effective defensive position. Zethus felt a flicker of disappointment. He had hoped for at least a token resistance, some small battle to relieve the monotony, but these humans seemed content to simply run away. Continue the advance, he ordered. Let's finish this campaign and move on to more interesting conquests. But as Battle Group 7 approached the Epsilon Gate, the narrow gravitational choke point in the Tanis corridor, Zethus's sensors detected something unexpected. A single ship waited in their path, One small, old cargo hauler. Zethus stared at the display, confused. Is this a malfunction? No, Warmaster. We're receiving a transmission from the vessel. Put it through. A human female's voice filled the bridge, speaking in accented but clear hegemony standard language. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran vessel Persephone's Gambit. You are entering Terran space without authorization. Turn back now or be destroyed. For a moment, Zethus couldn't process what he was hearing. Then he began to laugh. His officers joined him, the bridge filling with harsh Kryloth laughter. One cargo ship against 12 warships, one human against the hegemony. This should be amusing, Zethus said. Rear Admiral Marcus Holland stared at the tactical display in the Terran Defense Force Command Center and felt the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on his shoulders. The news was worse than anyone had imagined. Confirm those numbers, he said to his intelligence officer. Confirmed, sir. The Kryloth hegemony has deployed a battle group into human space. 12 warships. They've already neutralized 4 outer colonies without firing a shot. The colonists evacuated before they arrived. Smart, Holland muttered. No point dying for empty buildings. What's their heading? They're following the Tanis corridor, sir. It's the only practical hyperspace route to our core worlds. They'll reach the Epsilon Gate in approximately 18 hours. Holland pulled up detailed scans of the Epsilon Gate. It was a natural gravitational anomaly, a narrow point where ships had to drop out of hyperspace and navigate carefully through intense gravity fields. It was like a doorway, and once the hegemony passed through it, nothing stood between them and 14 human colonies, including Earth. Where's our fleet? Holland asked, though he already knew the answer. 3 weeks away, sir. Admiral Chen's battle group is engaged in anti-piracy operations in the far reaches. They received the recall order an hour ago, but even at maximum speed, they can't arrive in less than 21 days. 3 weeks. The hegemony would burn through human space in 3 days at their current pace. Holland's hands clenched into fists. We need someone at the Epsilon Gate, someone to slow them down, make them cautious, buy us time for the fleet to return. Sir, we don't have any military assets in that region. The nearest patrol ship is 48 hours away. Then put out a general call, Holland said. Any ship, military, civilian, I don't care. We need someone to hold that gate for 72 hours. His second-in-command looked at him with undisguised horror. Sir, you're asking someone to commit suicide. Against those warships, any lone vessel would be destroyed in minutes. I know what I'm asking, Holland said quietly, but if nobody holds that line, billions of people will die. Send the message. Make the offer clear. No sugarcoating. They'll be facing impossible odds. The message went out across all frequencies, encrypted military channels, and open civilian bands. It was short and brutal in its honesty. This is Rear Admiral Marcus Holland of the Terran Defense Force. We need a ship to hold the Epsilon Gate against enemy forces for 72 hours. This is a volunteer mission. The odds of survival are 0, but you'll be saving humanity. Any ship in range, please respond. For 5 minutes, there was only silence. Then a voice crackled over the communication channel. Female, calm, with a hint of dry humor. Admiral Holland, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the cargo vessel Persephone's Gambit. We're 4 hours from the Epsilon Gate. We'll hold your line. Holland felt his throat tighten. Captain Chen, did you understand the message? This is a one-way trip. I understand perfectly, Admiral. My crew voted. 8 votes for, 0 against. We're already adjusting course. Captain, I need to be clear. You'll be facing 12 hegemony warships. These are the same forces that crushed the Sarah Prime in 4 hours. Your ship is. An old cargo hauler held together with duct tape and hope, Sarah finished. Yeah, I know. But someone has to try, right? Might as well be us. Holland pulled up the Gambit's registry. 60 years old. No weapons beyond basic point defense. Maximum crew of 10, currently carrying 8. It was less a warship and more a flying warehouse. Godspeed, Captain Chen, Holland said. Humanity won't forget what you're doing. Just make sure you show up in 72 hours, Admiral. We'll try to leave some enemies for you to shoot. The communication ended. Holland sat down heavily in his chair and put his head in his hands. He had just sent 8 civilians to their deaths. But they might, just might, save billions. Aboard the Persephone's Gambit, Sarah gathered her crew in the small galley. All 8 of them crammed around the table, faces grim but determined. "You all heard the message," Sarah said. "This is your last chance to change your minds. We can drop anyone at the nearest station, no judgment. This is a volunteer mission, and that means you can choose not to volunteer." Marcus Wu, the chief engineer, snorted. "Captain, I've been flying with you for 12 years. If you think I'm going to let you fly into a suicide mission without someone to keep your engines running, you're out of your mind." "I'm staying," said James Park, the first officer. "Me too," added Elena Rodriguez, the navigator. One by one, every crew member confirmed. They were staying. They were fighting. Sarah felt her eyes burn with unshed tears. "All right then. Let's figure out how a cargo ship takes on a battle fleet." The planning session lasted 3 hours. They couldn't win through firepower, that much was obvious. The Gambit had industrial lasers meant for cutting asteroids, some mining charges, and basic point defense systems designed to shoot down small debris. Against military-grade shields and armor, these weapons would be like throwing rocks at a tank. "We need to think differently," Sarah said. "We can't fight like a warship. We need to fight like what we are." "A garbage scow," Wu suggested with dark humor. "A civilian ship that knows every dirty trick in the book," Sarah corrected. "We've outrun pirates, navigated asteroid fields, survived equipment failures in deep space. We know how to improvise." Elena pulled up detailed scans of the Epsilon Gate. "The gravitational fields here are intense and chaotic. Military ships hate this kind of environment because it interferes with their targeting systems and tactical coordination. But we've navigated worse. We use the environment as a weapon," James said slowly. "We know this terrain. They don't." Sarah nodded. "Exactly. And we don't fight fair. We don't follow military doctrine. We do whatever it takes to survive one more minute." Wu disappeared into the engineering sections and returned hours later with a frightening list of modifications. They stripped the mining charges from the cargo holds and rigged them as improvised mines. They boosted the power on the industrial lasers by bypassing safety systems. They reprogrammed the point defense to fire longer bursts, even though it would burn out the systems faster. "I'm cannibalizing the escape pods," Wu announced. "We can reroute their reactor cores to give us a 30% boost in power." "We won't have any escape pods left," Sarah pointed out. Wu met her eyes. "Captain, we both know nobody's escaping this. Might as well use the resources where they matter." Sarah wanted to argue, but he was right. She nodded. The Gambit arrived at the Epsilon Gate with 2 hours to spare. Sarah positioned the ship carefully in the center of the gravitational channel, right where enemy ships would have to pass. She released dozens of cargo containers filled with metal debris and reflective materials, creating a field of sensor-confusing clutter. "It's not much," Elena said, looking at their preparations. "No," Sarah agreed. "But it's what we have. Everyone to stations. Check your suits. Once the shooting starts, we'll be taking hull breaches." The crew dispersed. Sarah sat in her captain's chair and pulled up a picture on her personal screen. Her daughter, smiling, standing in front of her university. 22 years old now, studying to be a teacher. She lived on Earth. "I'm doing this for you, baby," Sarah whispered. The sensors began screaming. 12 massive signatures dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the gate. The hegemony had arrived. Sarah opened a communication channel. She'd practiced this speech in her head for the last few hours, trying to sound confident, trying to sound like someone who could stop an invasion fleet. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran vessel Persephone's Gambit. You are entering Terran space without authorization. Turn back now, or be destroyed." For a long moment, there was no response. Then Sarah heard it. Laughter. Harsh, alien laughter filling her communication channel. A translated voice spoke, dripping with contempt. "One cargo ship threatens the hegemony? This is amusing. I am War Master Zethus. Surrender now and we will grant you a quick death." Sarah smiled grimly. "You want us? Come and get us." She cut the channel and turned to her crew. Here we go. Remember the plan. We survive 1 minute at a time. Make every second count. On the tactical display, one of the hegemony destroyers broke formation and accelerated toward them. The battle for Epsilon Gate had begun. Sarah's hands flew across her controls. Elena, plot a course through Grid 7. Woo, I need those lasers ready to fire on my mark. Ready, Captain. The destroyer closed to weapons range and opened fire. Energy bolts streaked through space, brilliant and deadly. Sarah yanked the gambit hard to starboard using the gravitational eddies of the gate to pull them into an unexpected angle. The enemy fire missed by 50 meters. Their targeting computers aren't compensating for the gravity fluctuations, James reported. They're fighting by their sensors, not their instincts. Then let's make their sensors useless, Sarah said. She triggered one of the prepared cargo containers. It exploded, releasing a cloud of reflective chaff that scattered the destroyer's targeting beams. In the confusion, Sarah brought the gambit in close. Dangerously close. So close she could see details on the enemy hull. Woo! Now! The industrial lasers fired, not at the destroyer's shields, but at the magnetic mines they'd planted on debris floating in the chaff field. The mines activated, pulled toward the destroyer's metal hull by their magnetic locks, and detonated. The explosion wasn't large enough to destroy the warship, but it didn't need to be. The shaped charges directed toward Master Zethis stared at the destroyed destroyer and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Surprise. Not fear. Not yet. But genuine surprise. Report, he demanded. His tactical officer scrambled to analyze the battle. The human vessel used magnetic mines attached to debris. They lured our destroyer close, then activated the mines. Our commander didn't detect the trap until too late. One cargo ship just destroyed a hegemony destroyer. Zethis said slowly, one cargo ship. To be fair, Warmaster, the destroyer was only disabled, not destroyed. Zethis' clawed hand slammed down on his command console. Disabled is destroyed in the middle of enemy territory. That ship is dead weight now. Its crew is stranded. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to think tactically. This human captain is clever. She knows she can't win through conventional combat, so she's using traps and tricks. Should we proceed with caution, Warmaster? No, Zethis decided. We overwhelm her with numbers. Send 3 ships. Approach from different vectors. She can't trap all 3 at once. 3 hegemony cruisers advanced on the Persephone's gambit. They moved carefully now, scanning for mines and debris traps. Their shields were at maximum power. Sarah watched them come and felt sweat running down her back despite the ship's cold temperature. 3 at once. Her first trap had worked because the enemy was overconfident. They wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Woo, how's our reactor holding up? She asked. We're running at 115% of rated capacity. I can push it to 120 for short bursts, but much more and we risk a containment breach. We'll take what we can get. Elena, I need a micro-jump calculation. Her navigator's face went pale. Captain, micro-jumps this close to a gravitational anomaly are insane. The equations alone could take hours to calculate safely. You have 3 minutes, Sarah said. And it doesn't have to be safe. It just has to work once. Elena's fingers flew across her console, pulling up hyperspace calculations that would make any military navigator refuse the assignment. Microjumps were short-range hyperspace hops, usually only a few thousand kilometers. Near a gravitational anomaly like the Epsilon Gate, the risk of catastrophic failure was nearly 100%. Got something? Elena said. Maybe. Probably. There's a 60% chance we make it. 30% chance we get torn apart in hyperspace. 10% chance we miss our exit point and end up halfway across the galaxy. I'll take those odds, Sarah said. Everyone secure. The 3 cruisers opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams lanced through space, targeting the gambit from 3 different angles. Sarah waited until the last possible second, until her shields were screaming and her hull was starting to heat up from near misses. Jump, she shouted. The gambit flickered and vanished. For 1 terrible second, Sarah felt the universe twist around her. The ship shook so violently that her teeth rattled. Alarms screamed. Something in the engineering section exploded. Then they dropped back into normal space, directly behind one of the cruisers. Weapons range, James reported. Their rear shields are weaker. Sarah didn't hesitate. She dumped emergency power to the industrial lasers and fired everything they had. The focused beams, designed to cut through solid rock sliced into the cruiser's engine section. The enemy ship tried to turn, but Sarah was already moving, using the gravitational currents to slingshot around the crippled vessel. "Venting reactor plasma," Wu announced. The Gambit released a cloud of superheated gas from its damaged systems, creating a blinding fog that confused sensors and blocked targeting. The second cruiser fired blind, hitting its own damaged companion instead of the Gambit. "Two down," Sarah muttered. "One more." But the third cruiser had anticipated her move. It was already in position, weapons locked. Sarah saw the energy build up and knew she couldn't dodge in time. "Brace for impact." The beam hit the Gambit amidships. Shields failed instantly. Armor plating melted. Atmosphere vented from 3 compartments. The ship spun wildly, tumbling through space. Sarah fought the controls, barely managing to activate emergency thrusters. "Damage report." "We've lost cargo sections 2 and 4, James called out. "Hull breaches on decks 1 and 3. Medical bay is gone. Point defense is offline. Casualties?" A long pause. Chen and Martinez were in the medical bay. Sarah felt her heart sink. 2 dead already. She'd known it was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. "Seal those sections." "Ooh, can we still fight?" "Give me 5 minutes to reroute power around the damaged systems." "You have 3. The remaining cruiser was circling, preparing for a kill shot. Sarah used what little maneuvering power she had left to hide behind a floating piece of debris, buying time. War Master Zethus watched the tactical display with growing frustration. His 3 cruisers had engaged the cargo hauler. 2 were now disabled or destroyed. The third was taking its time, preparing to finish the human ship properly. "This is unacceptable," Zethus said. "How is one primitive vessel causing this much damage?" "The human captain is not fighting rationally," his intelligence officer reported. "She's taking risks that no military commander would take. The micro-jump alone should have been fatal. Our tactical computers rate its success probability at less than 0.01%. Then their computers are better than ours." "No, War Master. According to our scans, their navigational computer is 60 years out of date. We believe the human calculated that jump manually." Zethus turned to stare at his officer. "Manually? A hyperspace calculation with that many gravitational variables? That's impossible." Nevertheless, she did it. For the first time, Zethus felt a flutter of concern. This human captain was either incredibly lucky or incredibly skilled. Either way, she was dangerous. "Send 2 more ships," he ordered. "I want that cargo hauler destroyed now." Sarah counted the approaching signatures on her sensors. 5 ships total now, including the one that had damaged them. The odds were getting worse. "Wu, please tell me you have good news." "Define good," Wu replied. "The lasers are back online. The reactor is stable. Assuming stable means held together by optimism and expired warranty stickers. And I found 2 more mining charges we can use. That'll have to do." "Elena, where's the nearest gravity well?" 2,000 kilometers to port. It's a strong one." Sarah studied the approaching enemy formation. They were being more careful now, maintaining formation, covering each other's weak points. She couldn't pick them off one by one anymore. Time for a different approach. "We're going to do something stupid," Sarah announced. "James, I need you to aim our forward cameras at the lead ship and broadcast on all frequencies. Open channel, no encryption. Captain, trust me." Wu overload the reactor safeties. "I want maximum power to engines even if it means we blow up in 5 minutes." "Done. We'll blow up in 5 minutes." Sarah took a deep breath and opened the communication channel. "War Master Zethus, I'm guessing that's you in the lead ship. I've got a proposal." Zethus's translated voice came back immediately. "You dare speak to me, human?" "I dare because I'm the one who just destroyed 3 of your ships," Sarah shot back. "Here's the deal. You want to get through this gate. I want to stop you. But there's a third option neither of us has considered." "And what option is that?" Sarah smiled grimly. "We both die right here, right now. I've overloaded my reactor. In 4 minutes, this ship is going to explode with enough force to destabilize the gravitational fields of this entire gate. The resulting collapse will destroy every ship in a 10,000-kilometer radius, including yours. It was a complete bluff. The Gambit's reactor didn't have nearly enough power to cause that kind of damage, but Zethus didn't know that. "You're lying," Zethus said, but Sarah heard the uncertainty in his voice. "Am I? Your sensors can see my reactor output. It's climbing. You know what happens when a fusion reactor goes critical near a gravitational anomaly. The cascade effect is unpredictable. Sarah let her words sink in. So here's my proposal. Turn around. Leave human space, and we all get to live. You would sacrifice your own life? In a heartbeat. That's what humans do, War Master. We protect our own. There was a long silence. Sarah watched her sensors, wondering if Zethus would call her bluff. Finally, the War Master spoke. You are either very brave or very foolish, human. But I did not rise to command by taking unnecessary risks. We will withdraw. For now. Smart choice, Sarah said, keeping her voice steady despite the relief flooding through her. The hegemony ships began to pull back, repositioning away from the gate. Woo. Shut down the reactor overload before we actually explode, Sarah said quietly. Already done, Captain. Though for the record, we were never going to explode. Best case scenario, we would have just lost power. They didn't need to know that. James was staring at her. Captain, they're actually withdrawing. You bluffed a battle fleet. Don't celebrate yet, Sarah warned. They'll be back once they realize I was lying. We bought ourselves maybe an hour. 2 at most, she checked the chronometer. They'd been holding the line for 8 hours. 64 more to go. Sarah leaned back in her chair and allowed herself 1 minute of rest. 2 crew members dead. Ship heavily damaged. Enemies temporarily retreated but certain to return. They'd survived the first engagement. Barely. Get some water, check your suits, and gray. The reprieve lasted 90 minutes. Sarah spent every second of it preparing for what came next. Wu performed emergency repairs on the hull breaches, using spare plating and magnetic seals. Elena recalculated their position and mapped every gravitational eddy within 10,000 kilometers. James organized their remaining supplies and weapons. They had 2 mining charges left. The industrial lasers were functioning but operating at reduced capacity. Point defense was still offline. The reactor was stable but temperamental. Half their maneuvering thrusters were damaged. We're not going to last another fight like that last one, Wu said quietly as he worked on sealing a hull breach. Sarah didn't disagree. Then we make sure the next fight is different. How? I'm working on it. The sensors screamed a warning. The hegemony fleet was moving again. But this time they weren't sending 3 ships. They were sending 6, more than half their remaining force. War Master Zethus had decided to end this. All ships maintain formation, Zethus commanded. Overlapping shields, synchronized targeting. The human captain is clever, but she can't defeat mathematics. 6 ships firing together will overwhelm her defenses in seconds. His tactical officer nodded. We've analyzed all her previous tactics. We're ready for micro-jumps, debris fields, and reactor plasma dumps. We have countermeasures for everything. Then let's finish this. The 6 warships advanced in a tight formation, covering each other's weaknesses. It was textbook military doctrine, the kind of coordinated assault that had crushed dozens of civilizations. Sarah watched them come and felt a desperate plan forming in her mind. It was insane. It probably wouldn't work, but nothing about this situation was sane anyway. Elena, I need you to plot a course that takes us through Gravity Well 7, then loops back around Gravity Well 12. Elena pulled up the calculations. Captain, that course would put us under stress forces that will tear the ship apart. The hull integrity is already compromised. We won't survive those gravitational shears. The hull won't survive, Sarah agreed. But we don't need the whole ship to survive. We just need the forward section with the bridge and engines. Wu, can you set up an emergency separation of the cargo sections? Wu's eyes widened. You want to deliberately break the ship in half? I want to use the cargo sections as decoys while we maneuver the front section. Can you do it? It'll take time to set up the separation charges. You have 10 minutes. Wu ran for the engineering section. Elena continued plotting the course, shaking her head in disbelief. James checked the crew assignments. Captain, if we separate, anyone in the rear sections will be stranded. No life support, no navigation. I know, Sarah said quietly. Make sure everyone is in the forward sections before we separate. The remaining crew of 6 moved to the front of the ship. They sealed the bulkhead doors behind them, leaving the rear half of the Gambit empty and silent. Sarah tried not to think about the fact that she was about to destroy half her ship. The Gambit had been her home for 15 years. But homes could be rebuilt. People couldn't. Separation charges ready, Wu reported. Captain, are you sure about this? No, but we're doing it anyway. Everyone secure. This is going to get rough. The hegemony formation reached weapons range. 6 ships, all targeting the Gambit simultaneously. Enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. Fire, Zethus commanded. Energy beams lanced through space. Sarah triggered the separation charges at the same instant. The Gambit split in half with a shower of sparks and venting atmosphere. The rear sections tumbled away, all the ship's running lights still active, looking like a wounded vessel trying to escape. 4 of the 6 hegemony ships tracked the larger target, their automated systems following the bigger mass signature. Their weapons fire converged on the empty cargo sections, reducing them to glowing debris. Meanwhile, Sarah pushed the forward half of the Gambit into a tight turn, diving directly into Gravity Well 7. The gravitational forces grabbed the smaller ship segment and slung it forward at incredible speed. Hull stress at 150%, Elena reported. Structural integrity failing. Hold together, Sarah muttered to her ship. Just a little longer. The 2 hegemony ships that had tracked the correct target fired, but their beams passed through empty space where the Gambit had been a second before. The gravitational slingshot had accelerated them beyond the enemy's targeting predictions. Sarah looped around Gravity Well 12 and came up behind the hegemony formation. Now they had the advantage of position. Woo, everything we have left, fire! The industrial lasers opened up, targeting the rearmost warship's engines. At the same time, Sarah released their last 2 mining charges, timing them to impact during the moment of confusion. One charge struck a glancing blow, barely denting shields. The second hit directly on a damaged section from an earlier fight. It punched through and detonated inside the hull. The warship's rear section exploded outward, not destroyed, but badly damaged and venting atmosphere. That's 4 disabled, James reported. 8 total enemy casualties, but Sarah wasn't celebrating. The remaining 5 ships were turning, angry and focused. They had the Gambit pinned against the gravity well. No room to maneuver. No tricks left, all weapons depleted, Wu announced. Lasers are burned out. No charges. No countermeasures. We're out of tricks, Captain. Sarah looked at the tactical display and knew Wu was right. They'd fought brilliantly, survived impossibly long. But every ship has limits. Every crew has a breaking point. Time since we arrived at the gate? She asked. 23 hours, 17 minutes, less than a day. They'd held the line for less than a day and they needed to last 3 times that long. 48 hours to go. Impossible. All crew, Sarah said over the internal comm. This is the captain. I won't lie to you. We're out of weapons, low on options, and the enemy is coming. But we're still here. We're still fighting. Every minute we survive is another minute humanity has to prepare. So we keep going. We hold this line. Over the next 18 hours, the Gambit became a masterclass in desperation. With no weapons, Sarah used the only tool she had left. The ship itself and the environment. She learned every gravitational current in the Epsilon Gate. She used the wreckage from destroyed ships as obstacles and cover. When the hegemony ships fired, she positioned destroyed hulks between them and her ship, letting the wrecks absorb the damage. She vented atmosphere to create thrust when thrusters failed. She used the ship's emergency lights to blind sensors. She even manually dumped coolant into space, creating a freezing fog that temporarily disabled enemy targeting systems. The hegemony adapted to each trick, but Sarah kept improvising. When they learned to track her through the wreckage field, she hid inside a destroyed cruiser's hull. When they tried to flush her out with wide-area bombardment, she timed her movements to use the explosions themselves as cover. But the ship was dying. Every hour brought new failures. Life support was failing in sections. The reactor was cycling on and off unpredictably. Hull breaches appeared faster than they could be patched. And the crew was dying too. At hour 31, a random piece of debris punched through the bridge bulkhead. Elena was struck by shrapnel. She lived for 3 minutes, long enough to pass her navigation calculations to James, before bleeding out in her chair. At hour 42, the medical officer, trying to repair a damaged power conduit, was caught in an electrical surge. The shock killed him instantly. At hour 57, Wu was performing emergency repairs in the engine room when the hull section he was working on took a direct hit. The entire compartment vented into space. He managed to seal the breach before he died, saving the rest of the ship. Sarah felt each death like a physical blow. These were her people, her crew, her friends, but she couldn't stop. Couldn't slow down. Couldn't grieve. Every second of grief was a second the ship wasn't moving, wasn't evading, wasn't surviving. By hour 60, only 3 people remained alive. Sarah, James, and a junior engineer named Kim. The ship was a wreck held together by emergency force fields and prayers. Main power was gone. They were running on backup batteries that had maybe 6 hours of charge remaining. "Captain," James said quietly, "we're not going to make it to 72 hours. Sarah checked the chronometer. 60 hours, 18 minutes. 12 more hours to go. She looked at the tactical display. 5 hegemony warships remained active, circling like sharks around wounded prey. They knew the Gambit was defenseless now. They were taking their time, coordinating a final strike that would finish everything. "I know," Sarah admitted, "but we got 60 hours. That's 60 hours humanity had to evacuate to prepare to bring the fleet closer. We did what we came to do." "We failed," James said bitterly. "We were supposed to hold for 72 hours. We held as long as possible. That's all anyone can ask." Sarah pulled up the long-range communication system, preparing to send a final message to Admiral Holland. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion and blood loss. She'd been wounded 3 times in the last day but had kept it quiet, not wanting to demoralize the crew. "Rear Admiral Holland, this is Captain Chen. We've held the Epsilon Gate for approximately 60 hours against hegemony forces. We've destroyed or disabled 7 enemy warships. Our ship is no longer combat capable, and we estimate we have less than 1 hour before final destruction. We've bought humanity as much time as we can. I hope it was enough." "Chen out." She didn't wait for a response. The battle that followed was short and brutal. The Terran Defense Force, outnumbering the remaining hegemony ships by more than 15 to 1, swept through the Epsilon Gate with overwhelming force. War Master Zethus, recognizing the hopelessness of his situation, ordered an immediate retreat. 3 of his 5 remaining ships managed to jump to hyperspace before the human fleet could destroy them. 2 were not so lucky. They were torn apart by concentrated missile barrages, adding to the graveyard of wrecks that now filled the Epsilon Gate. Zethus's flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was the last to escape. As it prepared to jump, the War Master took one final look at the human cargo ship still drifting in the center of the battlefield. The Persephone's Gambit was barely recognizable. Half the ship was gone. The hull was scorched and perforated with hundreds of holes. It listed to one side, venting frozen atmosphere that sparkled in the light of distant stars. 1 cargo ship. 8 crew members. 60 hours of absolute hell. "Mark that ship's registry," Zethus ordered his intelligence officer. "Mark the captain's name. If I ever encounter humans again, I want to know what we're facing." "Yes, War Master. Should I classify them as a military threat?" Zethus was silent for a long moment, watching the Gambit grow smaller as his ship prepared to jump. "Classify them as something worse. Classify them as a species that doesn't know when to quit." The Eternal Dominion vanished into hyperspace, fleeing toward hegemony space with news of a species that had done the impossible. Admiral Holland directed the recovery operation from his flagship, the Thermopylae. Medical shuttles raced toward the Gambit, cutting through the debris field. Engineers scrambled to stabilize the dying ship before its reactor finally gave out. "Captain Chen, this is Recovery Shuttle Delta 3. We're approaching your position. Prepare for emergency evacuation." There was a long pause before Sarah responded. Her voice was barely a whisper. 3 survivors. Bridge section. Life support is. We're on emergency oxygen. Batteries failing. Understood. We're coming in now. Stay with us, Captain." The shuttle magnetically clamped onto what remained of the Gambit's hull. Emergency cutting tools sliced through the sealed bridge door. Medical teams rushed inside, finding 3 survivors in various states of injury and exhaustion. Sarah Chen was still in the captain's chair, her hands frozen on the controls. She'd refused to let go until she knew for certain the fleet had arrived. Now, with rescue finally here, her body gave out. She slumped forward, unconscious, before the medics reached her. James Park was found at the navigation station, having taken over Elena's duties after she died. He was awake but delirious from oxygen deprivation. Kim, the young engineer, was in the engine room, still trying to keep the reactor stable even as the rescue team carried her out. She kept insisting she needed to finish the repairs. All 3 were rushed to the medical bay aboard the Thermopylae. The doctors worked for 12 hours straight, treating injuries that ranged from severe radiation exposure to broken bones to psychological trauma. Sarah woke up 2 days later in a clean, white hospital room that smelled of antiseptic. For a moment she thought she was dead. Heaven, maybe. Certainly not the Gambit's cramped, dirty bridge. Easy, Captain, a gentle voice said. Admiral Holland sat in a chair beside her bed. You're safe. You're aboard my flagship. My crew? Sarah's throat was raw, her voice barely working. James Park is recovering. Some broken ribs, severe exhaustion, but he'll make a full recovery. Kim is doing well considering. Physically fine, though the psychologists want to work with her. Holland paused. The other 5 didn't make it. I'm sorry, Sarah closed her eyes. She'd known, of course. She'd watched them die. But hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that hurt worse than any physical injury. We held the line, she whispered. You did more than that, Holland said. You destroyed or disabled 8 hegemony warships with a cargo vessel. Your stand gave us the time we needed to recall the fleet and mount a proper defense. Captain Chen, you saved billions of lives. I lost 5 of my crew. I know, and every one of them died a hero. Holland leaned forward. The hegemony has withdrawn from human space. Their remaining ships fled back through the outer rim. Intelligence suggests they've reclassified humanity as a major threat. They're not coming back. Sarah processed this information slowly. The mission was over. They'd succeeded. Humanity was safe, so why did she feel so empty? Over the next few weeks, as Sarah recovered, she learned the full scope of what had happened. The news of her stand at the Epsilon Gate had spread throughout human space like wildfire. People were calling her a hero. The government wanted to give her medals. Military academies wanted to study her tactics. The wreckage of the Persephone's Gambit was carefully recovered and transported to Earth. Engineers examined every damaged system, every improvised modification, trying to understand how such an old ship had survived so long against overwhelming odds. It shouldn't have been possible, one engineer told Sarah during her recovery. Your ship was held together by patch welds and hope. By all calculations, it should have been destroyed in the first engagement. Hope is stronger than calculations, Sarah replied quietly. When Sarah was finally well enough to leave the medical bay, she was invited to a formal ceremony aboard the Thermopylae. She went reluctantly, uncomfortable with the attention. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a cargo captain who'd survived when her crew hadn't. The ceremony was attended by hundreds of people, officers, politicians, journalists. Sarah stood at attention in a borrowed dress uniform, feeling out of place. Admiral Holland spoke first, recounting the battle in detail. Then the Terran Prime Minister took the podium. Throughout human history, the Prime Minister said, there have been moments when ordinary people are called upon to do extraordinary things. Captain Chen and her crew answered that call. They stood between humanity and destruction. They held a line that should not have held. They fought a battle they could not win. And through their sacrifice, they saved us all. Sarah received the Terran Star, the highest military honor humanity could bestow, even though she'd never been in the military. James Park and Kim received the same. The 5 dead crew members were awarded posthumously Wu, Elena, Chen, Martinez, the medical officer whose name Sarah couldn't say without her voice breaking. After the ceremony, as people congratulated her and shook her hand, Sarah felt disconnected from it all. They were celebrating a victory, but all she could think about was the cost. Later that evening, she stood in the observation deck of the Thermopylae, looking out at the stars. The Epsilon Gate was visible in the distance, still cluttered with debris from the battle. Not enjoying the party? A voice asked. Sarah turned to find an older woman in captain's uniform. The name tag read Martinez. You're related to... Sarah started. My nephew, the woman said quietly. Diego Martinez. He was your medical officer. I'm so sorry, Sarah said, the words inadequate but all she had. Don't be. Diego died doing what he believed in. Protecting people. That's all he ever wanted. Captain Martinez looked out at the stars. I wanted to thank you for giving him a chance to make a difference, for leading them well. I got 5 people killed. No. You gave 5 people the opportunity to save billions. There's a difference. The older captain smiled sadly. Diego sent a message before the end. He said he was proud to serve with you. He said if he had to die, at least it mattered. Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. It mattered. They all mattered. The 2 captains stood together in silence, mourning the dead and honoring the sacrifice. Weeks turned into months. Sarah's physical injuries healed, though the psychological scars took longer. The Terran government offered her any position she wanted. Command of a warship, an admiral's rank, a teaching position at the academy. Sarah declined them all. "I'm a cargo hauler," she told Admiral Holland. "That's all I've ever been. That's all I want to be." "You're a hero," Holland insisted. "Heroes are people who do extraordinary things." "I just did what needed doing." Sarah managed a slight smile. Besides, the galaxy still needs people to haul cargo. Eventually, she received a new ship. The Terran government built it specifically for her, a cargo vessel with state-of-the-art systems and the latest technology. They wanted to call it Persephone's Gambit 2 or The Last Stand or something appropriately dramatic. Sarah named it Remembrance. Before she left on her first cargo run, Sarah visited the Naval Museum on Earth where the remains of the original Gambit were on display. The ship had been partially reconstructed, showing the damage and the improvised modifications her crew had made. Thousands of people visited every day. School children stood in awe. Veterans saluted. Everyone wanted to see the ship that had held the line. Sarah walked through the exhibit alone, touching the scarred hull plating, seeing the bridge where Elena had died, the engine room where Wu had made his last repairs. A plaque near the entrance read, "The Persephone's Gambit. Crew of 8 held the..."